This is
Make it plain.
Make it plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
All right, everyone. Once again, time for another edition of Thursday Coach here on Make It Plain with our dear friend, the founder of dailycoach.com, the largest online progressive community, and also the founder of Civics with a Q, civics.com, Marcos Melitsas. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Doing great, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm good. So another very interesting and exciting week. We're, barely 40 days out, right?
Oh, my God, Mark. It's coming. People are voting. It's happening.
Yeah. People started voting.
Yeah.
What are your latest prognostications in that way?
I mean, the latest numbers is that everything is locked steady. Everybody's so fixated on, oh, Kamala's got a new great TV ad. Oh, Donald Trump said something stupid. Oh, nothing's moving, Mark. We're seeing the lowest number of undecided voters probably in recorded history since they started polling. And those undecided voters, quite frankly, Mark, they're not people who are they're trying to decide whether they're going to actually vote or not. I mean, they're anybody who's looks at Harris and looks at Trump and is like, I don't know. It's not because they're trying to weigh the pros and cons of each party's platform. They're just stupid, politically stupid. I mean, and they may not even care about voting. So they're trying to decide whether it's even worth their while to cast a ballot. So, and there's very, very few of them. So what that means is that the race is locked in as far as what people think. What we don't know and what this is going to be decided on is in who turns out to vote.
Right.
So, for example, and I think we discussed this last week, I believe, Black women may be 94% to 4% Kamala Harris, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're 8% of the electorate, or whether the 20% of the electorate, right, would make a big difference, obviously. So it's really at this point, the game is all about getting our people to turn out to vote, getting young people to vote, getting Black and brown and single women to vote, getting urban liberals to vote, and then hoping that they continue to do a crappy job in their get out the vote operations and they don't get their people to vote. But quite frankly, if we get our people out to vote, we win. I mean, they can get every single white, male, incel, Nazi out to vote. There's more of us than there are of them. They're just historically more likely to vote than us, right? So we got to work a little bit harder to get our people out. But if we do, we're going to win this thing.
Is the campaign, are we doing a good job at getting people out?
Everything I'm seeing is that the left has a pretty robust and effective get out the vote operation. So we have by far, it's not even close, more field staffers, more campaign offices in the battleground states. Our organizations that are doing the get out the vote effort are organizations that have been doing this for a long time, like Organized Labor and Planned Parenthood and NARAL and environmental organizations. They're all part of this effort to get out the vote. Republicans fired their people when Trump took over the RNC. And last I heard, which was this morning, is that most of their get out the vote operations had sort of folded. And the last man standing is Elon Musk's super PAC, which just started doing get out the vote operation like 2 weeks ago. I mean, that is their GOTV. And obviously they have no experience in doing get out the vote operations, right? This is a brand new super PAC. So does that mean that Musk can't throw $40 billion at this thing and make something happen? Who knows? Maybe he does. But the fact is that they don't have a real robust and present operation, particularly given the fact that voting has begun in a lot of states. And even in states where it hasn't begun, things like ballot requests have already begun, like in Pennsylvania. So we have, I think objectively, we have a far better get out the vote operation. Does not guarantee that they'll get people out. That's on the individuals to be motivated to turn out and vote. But as far as I can tell, motivation, excitement about Kamala is still strong, and we have that robust field, and so I like what I see. I'm cautiously optimistic, and but I also will say that in our polling, we can't believe that Trump's anti-Haitian and anti-Venezuelan racism, the things that they're saying, but Mark, it's working. His numbers among white people are going up. They like that racism. So we cannot assume that people will be disgusted by his overt racism. Quite the opposite is happening. It's actually engaging and motivating them. They really love to be afraid of Black people. And now that they're eating your pets, they're extra. They love it. They are just so revved up about that.
Yeah, yeah. The full disclosure, though, and you've seen some of this press, and there's a lot of conversation about it. There are concerns that the campaign, however, the Harris campaign, while Trump is mobilizing whites, the Harris campaign is not doing enough to mobilize the Black electorate. Not a lot of money spent on targeted Black media. Not a lot of money has gone toward the some of the Black get out to vote, the African American get out to vote efforts. And full disclosure, those of us, who've been around and know a little bit of this history, obviously Jesse Jackson changed the Democratic Party. And for years, there were always efforts, investments made to get out the Black vote. And one of the things that Reverend Jackson taught us and made a staple, and people have gotten away from that because everybody just wants to do television now, was Reverend Jackson had this strategy, this rule of thumb, where every cycle we registered new African-American voters, no matter what. We didn't take for granted that everybody was registered or that their registration was current or that they had not been purged. It was automatic. And then we would do math and look at precincts and see what the margin was for Democrats versus Republicans, and then register as many voters to meet that margin or overcome that margin. Now everybody's kind of like sports. Everybody does sabermetrics rather than do what's instinctive. That's the same in politics. It's television and whatever that means versus, hey, let's go register some voters. Let's be sure we have new voter registrations going into this. Let's inspire some people. So that is a concern. And folks, in the days to come, you'll probably be seeing a lot more news about that because some of my colleagues are prepared to make some big noise about that. Why do you have all of this money in the Harris-Walz campaign, but you're not investing it? Now, her numbers right now, you mentioned 94% of Black women. Black men are a little bit off.
Yeah.
And overall together, her numbers are not as high as they ought to be. The entire African-American electorate should be in the 90s, but I think women and men together were probably in the high 80s.
Yeah.
And you need that. You gotta have that solid vote. And last thing I'll say on it, and have you comment, and I was sharing with someone the other day, the other difference is that social media has been in the game for a minute. It is affecting people's minds, and people see things. I had an argument with someone in the street the other day who was convinced because of social media that one, Kamala Harris has locked up all the Black men in history, and that her father is white, with the help of Janet Jackson. And, Janet and I probably should have been in a relationship and been married. I'm disappointed by this because that jeopardizes any relationship we might have in the future by her saying this. As I said to you before we started the post, there are pictures of the Loch Ness Monster. The people even have pictures of aliens who've landed on this planet. But if you Google Kamala Harris's father, there is no white picture that shows up anywhere. So I don't get it. Imagine
it's even a deep fake in this day and age. You can fake it. You can turn her actual father white. They haven't even pretended.
But Marcos, think about this. Let's say Barack Obama appeared today, who actually had a white mother. See, when he first ran social media and had the power that he has now, If Barack Obama came on the scene today, he'd be finished because he actually has a white mother. And if someone wanted to weaponize that and say, oh, we don't want to support Barack Obama because he has a white mother, guess what? He actually has one. You wouldn't have to fake it. There's a picture of her. There are pictures of him with her in the picture. So that's scary, man. That something that's not real can have this impact.
But Mark, help me out here. What does Donald Trump have a white father? What exactly is it supposed to do? It's we're not going to vote for the black woman because she has a white father, so they'll vote for the white man with 2 white parents. Is that the logic?
Well, yeah, and it's also there's misogyny, and when it's reserved for black women, it's called misogynoir. There's some sexism in this. A black woman can have a biracial parent. A black woman can be biracial, but maybe a man can. There's a lot of women hatred going on here, coupled with the fact that some people, especially when it comes to black men, there's this other meme that got going a few years ago. The only good things that are happening are for black women. Everything's black women. Oh, Biden appointed a black woman to the Supreme Court. Biden appointed a black and vice president. So people have been able to pick that. And I'll tell you, I'll remind you, the biggest culprit of that, again, social media, was Clubhouse. Every night on Clubhouse, it was black women versus black men, black women versus black women. I'm glad Clubhouse is gone. And if it wasn't African-American women versus African-American men, vice versa, it was Africans versus African-Americans.
Oh.
And that fed into that nativist thing. The silver lining in Trump attacking Haitians, I've not heard as many black nativists come out and attack Haitians as well. That's interesting.
Right.
Before it was like, oh, we don't like African immigrants. We don't like immigrants. It's black nativists. We don't like immigrants. But now I haven't heard, they haven't been able to react to what Trump has been doing to Haitians. So man, we're just, I think when we look back on this era of social media, I think we'll find there was a lot of stuff going on that really, really set us back. But anyway.
And then you have the Russians feeding into it too, right? So so yeah, there's a growing gender divide with black men and black women. I think it's not as dramatic as the gender divide between white men and white women, which is, 40 points at this point, right? I mean, women are like 60-40 Democratic and men are 60-40 Republican. It's, I don't know how people date anymore, as it's getting harder and harder to find somebody who's ideologically matched with you if you're white. And so it is concerning. I quite don't understand it, Mark, and it's disappointing. And just like Republican Latinos, right? I mean, that's my my community's challenge is why. And there's a lot more Republican Latinos than are Republican black men. So definitely these are challenges. But why would you support a party and a candidate that so clearly hates them and has zero representation in their staff, in their administration back in the day? I will never understand. But
kind of like log cabin Republicans.
Yeah, who just paid $250,000 to have Melania speak at their convention for some bizarre reason. Yeah. So, but the voter registration numbers were down this year compared to 2020, but 2020, you got to understand. I mean, we went from Hillary Clinton getting like 68 million votes to like Joe Biden getting like 78. I mean, there was a ginormous effort in 2020. So just the universe of registerable people shrunk because Democrats did such a good job in 2020 of closing that gap. The Harris campaign has more money than God, and they'll keep having more money. I mean, they're what, 6 or 8 million and counting. And so I do not understand why they would not invest in Black media, Latino media, Spanish language media at greater levels. Quite simply because, again, there's no persuadables left. Nobody's trying to decide between the two candidates. It's all about getting your core voters out to vote. So TV ads aren't going to persuade anybody, but if they're not going to persuade anybody who's a Trump supporter to vote for Harris and vice versa, but they could convince somebody who doesn't know if they're going to vote, but they are a natural Democratic constituency. So young people who have low turnouts, how do you get them to turn out? Well, you probably spend a lot of money and energy on TikTok. I mean, I presumably, I don't know. That's not my job. But the same with the Black community and the Latino community. How do you get those critically important communities to turn out? They will be the margin of victory in Arizona, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, pretty much every North Carolina, pretty much every battleground state, even Wisconsin, because of Milwaukee. I mean, it's a small. The Black population of Wisconsin is relatively small, but it's when the state is 50-50, it will be the difference. So you do need to actively spend considerable resources in getting out those harder to reach communities. And Democrats did that in 2020. I mean, Joe Biden had a organization targeting South Asian Indian Americans in Atlanta.
Right.
And there's like 20,000 of them, compared to a state that has, 8 million, 9 million. So a smart campaign is going to invest those resources. If the Harris campaign isn't doing that right now in the Black community, that is alarming. So hopefully either they are or they're in the process of getting that ready to go and launch, because money's not an excuse this year.
So last point on that, you mentioned other states. Because of this Democratic super consultant TV ad strategy that has become so pervasive, the case can be made that a little more investment in Black voters in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes would have won that seat.
Yes.
Those numbers show. Same thing with Sherry Beasley in North Carolina for the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Candidates in these states, we lose by a sliver. I mean, you could have, 250,000 more Black voters mobilized would have made the difference.
Yeah.
So there's that. But let's go.
We'll say this, Mark. You look at Georgia. Remember, we used to talk before Stacey Abrams came on the scene. We used to talk about how there were 700,000 unregistered Black voters just in Metro Atlanta alone.
Right.
She came in, people invested in her organization. They registered a bunch of people and turned Georgia from a solid red state to a purple battleground state, and we got the 2 Senate seats. So it can be done. It has to be done. We have a model of it. And I've said Mississippi is in that boat. Mississippi is a purple state, and the right investment can get us there. So we have a model of it. We just people need to spend that money. And man, a fraction of that money is going to Kamala Harris right now, because she's going to probably get to $1 billion by the end of this thing. I would not be surprised.
Right.
100 million of that spent in some critical states, in Alaska, in Mississippi, North Carolina, to make it more tilt blue. You got a whole different map all of a sudden.
Yeah, you do. It's a whole different situation. Right. But I shared something with you last night, and you will still get these polls all over the place. One poll last night I sent you saying how Donald Trump has the majority. You mentioned the Latino vote, has the majority of the Latino vote. Do you buy that? What is civics?
No.
What is civics saying?
I mean, civics is I think is in line with the exit polling, which is about 60, 40, 62, 63, 37, 38. That's probably where it's going to all end up. So here's the problem with a lot of that polling. That was remind me, was that a subsample, or was that a poll of Latino voters?
Let me check. I think it may have been subsample.
Yeah. All right. So subsample. So keep in mind, all right, margin of error. So you have a typical poll will have 500, 600 respondents. That's a margin of error about 4%, which is fine for the big picture. Once you start digging into those subsamples, though, I mean, if you have 600 respondents, how many Black voters are you going to have there, right, to be in line with the American population? Like 60. You can't get a representative sample with 60. How many Latinos? 75?
Yeah.
You can't get a representative sample. So people end up digging into the subsamples, and they'll go like, oh, well, it has women at 50-50, so this can't be real. Those are fair, valid concerns, but you cannot extrapolate what those individual subgroups are. In fact, by breaking them out, you're almost like, as a pollster, you're kind of shooting yourself in the face, because you cannot have a representative sample with any kind of real margin of error that is reasonable by digging into those subsamples. So I wouldn't dig into that too much. The poll could be wrong. I mean, it's just the overall poll could be wrong. The subsamples are almost assuredly wrong. So there's only so much you can extrapolate into that. So polling experts will tell you, don't look at the subsamples. It's an easy way to discredit a poll. Not sure if it actually does. And honestly, I've dug into it, and I don't know if it can discredit a poll that way or not. But it's tough. I mean, here's the reality of polling is getting Black people to respond is hard. Getting Latinos to respond is hard, particularly since there's a significant number that are Spanish only. Getting young people to respond, I mean, they don't answer no phone. And they sure, even civics is email based. I mean, they don't have email. So these are all challenges that you have to really work through to get a representative sample. And so that's why a lot of the low quality polls don't even bother. And a lot of those low quality polls were actually Republican pollsters that are designed, literally designed to flood the zone with bullshit polls to influence the polling averages. So people can freak out about, oh, we're losing, because they understand the power of narrative and the power of storytelling. And and liberals are very, very much susceptible to it, right? So we see the difference with Donald Trump right now. It's pretty consistently down 2 to 3 points nationally and in most of the battleground states. And Republicans act like they're winning. Joe Biden was down 2 points, and you would think the election was over and Donald Trump got elected back in May. Right. And so they understand that it's demotivating to progressives to show Donald Trump ahead. And so they'll literally produce bullshit polls because it's expensive to poll. You don't have high quality pollsters anymore. Civics is not releasing polling because we got paying clients for the polling. So we're not releasing our numbers into the public domain. So who is investing in BS polls to influence the narrative? It's the same people that are investing billions of dollars into Fox News and Newsmax and ONN and million different AM radio talk show hosts and million websites and Daily Caller. Like, they never stop spending money on media to try to influence that narrative. And they're very, very good at it. And for them, this polling stuff, that's a cheap way to influence the narrative, right? Because then Nate Silver goes around saying, oh, Donald Trump's got a 65% chance of winning. Donald Trump never had a 65% chance of winning. And just an advice, anybody listening or watching, don't listen to Nate Silver. Nate Silver is full of freaking shit at this point. He had Donald Trump with a 65% chance of winning 2 weeks ago. Then last week, it was Kamala Harris with a 52% chance of winning. And this week, he has Kamala Harris with a 55% chance of winning. And nothing has changed in the race. I promise you, nothing has changed. And yet, so if you have a model that thinks that the race in 2 weeks has gone from 65% Trump to 55% Harris, which is what, 65, that's 20, a 30-point shift in the race in 2 weeks is broken. And it just means, don't get excited because next week they'll have Trump up by 40, by 90% or something. The reality is that the race is within the margin of turnout, and nothing will change that. The side that outworks the other side is going to win this thing. And I've said that if we work extra hard, there may be a blowout. But if we don't, they may win. That's where we're at, right? The margin between Trump winning and a Harris blowout is actually not that much. It's shifting the national numbers about 2 points. That's the difference between losing and a blowout because of the stupid electoral college.
Lastly, you just wrote a piece today about the Senate race, the control of the Senate. And where do we stand on that?
Yeah, so just big picture is not looking very good. So we have a 52-48 majority right now. Joe Manchin retired. We lost that seat. So now it's 51-49. We could only lose, no, it was 51. It's a 51-49 Senate, right? So we can only lose one seat and win the White House to hold the Senate, right? So Joe Manchin, gone. John Tester, there's no good polling on the race, but it's going to be a 20, 25 point Trump victory. For John Tester to pull it off would be legendary. And what little polling we have seen, shows what you would expect. He's down about 5-6 points, while Trump is up by about 20. So he's overperforming the partisan lean of the state, but closing that gap is difficult. So it does not look good for him. Not saying he's going to lose, but it does not look good for him. So where does that leave us? We only have 2 traditional pickup opportunities, and they're in Texas and Florida. Oh boy, nobody wants to depend in Texas and Florida. And both those seats seem competitive. But all the polling I've seen is that we're down 2-3 points. Again, here's where shifting the national electorate 2 to 3 points just in turnout could mean the difference between us winning and losing those seats. But again, I wouldn't bet my firstborn on us winning either of those seats. Going to work hard to make it happen, but if we do, it'll be an upset. So what does that leave us? And so in the traditional map, that would be it. Like, okay, we may actually be on track to lose the Senate, but a funny thing has happened. Nebraska. Very, very red Nebraska. Nebraska that Trump won by 18 points last time and probably will win by about the same amount this time. Nebraska's Senate seat has gotten really interesting. We have no Democrat running in the race. There is a independent named Dan Osborne, who is a labor leader, combat veteran, pipe fitter, union guy, blue collar, very, very Nebraska. And Deb Fischer, the incumbent Republican senator, is weirdly unpopular in Nebraska for reasons that I don't know. I don't know if it's a local thing or if it's misogyny or what it is, but she is not very popular in the state. And so we just had a poll released by Survey USA, was a good pollster, that has him up 45-44 in that race. We've seen other polling that has Deb Fischer consistently in the low 40s, high 30s. She's just not very popular. And Osborne is, he doesn't have the Democrat label on him, which in itself probably gives him a 10-point boost. And so we have what is a competitive race. Now, Nebraska, again, is a tough race. It's a tough state for Democrat. All the Republican ads are Democrat Dan. Nebraska's Bernie Sanders Dan. Like they're making every effort to tie the Democratic brand to him. But weirdly, it's not sticking. I mean, because they've been doing this for months. And Osborne is still overperforming where he should be had he been running as a Democrat. And he'll caucus with the Democrats. It's not, I mean, his platform is a Democratic platform, except he's pro-gun and he wants to shut the border, but he wants to give amnesty to undocumented workers in the country. So, fine, great. So it's actually a fascinating. It would be absolutely, in a election cycle as crazy as this one, where we've had so many incredible twists and turns, it would be something if Nebraska saved the Democratic majority in the Senate. Oh, and there's a real chance. So I'm going to say, anybody you're looking for a race to contribute to, it isn't Kamala Harris anymore. She's got more money than she'll have more money in the bank at the end of the race. She cannot spend what she has right now. Dan Osborne, independent Senate candidate in Nebraska. Nebraska is a cheap state. He's just trying to get to 2 million. Right. Kamala Harris blinks and races 2 million. He's just trying to get to 2 million. Democrats, the Democratic Party's not spending in that race because he's not a Democrat. And the second they did, then the Republicans would be like, see, told ya, he's a Democrat. We're not endorsing Daily Kos. I'm writing about him. We're raising money, but we're not endorsing him because we only endorse Democrats, and we don't want the Republicans saying he's a Democrat. They're doing it anyway, but nobody's buying it. But if the Democrats came in, then it would be too obvious, right? So he's got to raise all the money on his own. He doesn't have party support, but he doesn't need that much money because it's Nebraska and it's cheap. And it's and then the other factor that's kind of interesting about Nebraska is that Omaha is that one electoral vote that Democrats are likely to win this year. It's a very important electoral vote because that means that Democrats could lose North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, but as long as they win Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, plus that one electoral vote, they get to 270. So Republicans try to change the law at the last minute to make Nebraska winner take all. Nebraska and Maine are the only two states that have this system. That effort failed. So that means that electoral vote is in play, which means that Kamala Harris's campaign has a robust field operation in Omaha, Nebraska, that will turn out Omaha Democrats to the polls. And that will help Don Osborne as well, because he doesn't have to build a full get out the vote operation. He can focus on the rural areas of the state to minimize the margins in that parts of the state, while Harris' campaign brings out the vote in Omaha and in that full congressional district. So there's a lot of little funky little dynamics at play that make that a really compelling race. So Dan Osborne in Nebraska, if you're looking for a place to donate a little bit of money, I think that's a really, really smart play. Your dollar cannot go further anywhere else for control of the Senate than the Nebraska Senate race.
That's good to know. Check it out, folks. Folks, always check out marcosdailycoach.com, civics with a Q.com. Very interesting, folks. We are marching along, hoping for the rest. And as we always say, get involved. Marcos has given us some great advice. Get involved in Nebraska if you like. You can be involved without living in the state. You can phone bank from right where you are. Please, man, please, sir, get it.
And no matter where you live, there's a short drive to a competitive seat, no matter where you live.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Thank you, Marcos.
Thank you so much. Have a great one. Talk to you next week.
It's next week. Thank you.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.